Has the Jesus story been exaggerated? I recently went out to the streets to ask people who they think Jesus is, and I kept on getting one common response.
Probably believe Jesus was a real person at some point, just not in the same light that people depict him as now. Been taken out of the light of what it was back then and made into something much, much larger than it was.
I think Jesus was a real person that kind of got translated over years and years and years and made out to be a bigger thing than it actually was.
I just think a lot of the time when humans are recording stuff, they tend to, change it slightly. Obviously it 100% could be real. I wasn't there, I don't know. But I think parts of it were changed, I think. But I still think he was a good person.
So has the Jesus story been exaggerated? I mean, after all, these events happened years ago. There's been plenty of time for things to be misheard, to evolve, written up for dramatic effect, and spiced up for personal gain. Has it all just been exaggerated? Well, look, we can be confident that the answer is no. And here are 3 reasons why. Firstly, we actually have the early accounts, and they match the modern ones. We might assume that these modern accounts about Jesus are exaggerated if we didn't have any early copies, but we do. Even in the last 100 years, archaeologists have found more and more copies and fragments of the biblical accounts, often dating way back to the 1st and 2nd century from the events, preserved in their original language. And when scholars compare these ancient documents to our modern accounts, there are no clear changes. And so this isn't my opinion, it's been empirically proven that no change or exaggeration has taken place over time. And so if you open up the Bible today, you can be fully confident that what you're reading here is exactly what was written back then. And it's not been through rounds and rounds of translation either. Modern Bibles are translated straight from the original language. If you read Greek, you can even read the originals. Put simply, these early copies, they obliterate the theory that Jesus has been exaggerated over time. Well, secondly, all of these different early accounts, they match each other. You know, if you play a game of telephone where kids whisper something down a line and you end up with wild results, if you go out and play that with dozens of different groups, you're going to end up with dozens of different wild results. But when it comes to the accounts about Jesus, all the different groups say the same thing about him. That he lived, he performed miracles, he claimed to be God, he died on a cross, he rose from the dead. And whilst all the different accounts have different angles on these events, even the intimate details match each other. And so once again, we could easily write Jesus off as exaggerated if everyone was telling a different story. But rather, in reality, all the different early accounts substantiate one another. There are 42 unique surviving texts about Jesus in the first 150 years. Now that's the same as we have on Tiberius Caesar. Historians would consider that very strong evidence given how few records actually survived from 2,000 years ago. There are the eyewitness accounts in the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, Peter, and others. Then there are the early writings by those who followed Jesus, people like Polycarp, Clement, Ignatius, Justin Martyr, and others. Then we have early writings by those who were Jesus' enemies, Josephus, Tacitus, Lucian, Celsus, other Greek and Roman authors. And together, these create an astonishingly cohesive picture, meaning we can be confident in what happened. Thirdly, all of these early accounts had trustworthy writers. Again, we could easily accuse the Jesus stories of being exaggerated if the writers all had lots to gain from writing them down that way. If they all got rich and famous and bought private yachts, then sure. But the opposite is true. Curiously, the writers made their lives considerably harder by writing what they did. Many of them faced rejection from their own people, the Jews. Many faced extreme persecution, even death from Rome, who tried to cover up the whole thing. Many gave their lives to pass on these accounts to us, and that makes them hugely compelling testimony. You see, these writers had very little incentive to exaggerate. Rather, they actually had every incentive to keep quiet, downplay, even tone it down. And this makes their bold testimony about Jesus particularly captivating and persuasive. So there we go. 3 reasons that we can be confident Jesus hasn't been exaggerated over time. We have the early accounts from multiple different authors who were credible witnesses. Now this leaves you with a conundrum, because if the history is trustworthy and the accounts haven't been changed, well, how are you going to respond to this? You see, if we're honest, many people, they use the theory that Jesus has probably just been exaggerated as an excuse for ignoring him or not following him. Let me plead with you. Don't live your life behind that smokescreen, because the truth is too good to miss.